Hey everyone, it's Emily here from Phoenix Gateway and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the second part of my story. I did the first part last week. Second part is this week, and it's a continuation for those who are interested in knowing really how Phoenix Gateway came about, as well as Seed of the Soul. This is a really good way to get to know a little bit about me, and to know a little bit about my story, and to understand why I have chosen transformational tours to be a very big part of my life, and why I feel so aligned to doing the work that I do, and to help others on their journey of self-healing and self-discovery. So without further ado, I'll get into this as well. This is my story part 2. I'd love to hear your story, or if you'd like to write any comments, please do so below in the comments section. Okay, so again, I wrote this as I did the last one. I wrote this around 2009, 2010, this one. So 13, 14 years ago. And I will just start. Who could ask for a better relationship and more love than that of my family? After the heartbreaking death of my husband, although alone without partner, I had total support from my parents, my in-laws, and my sisters. My mother, my rock, was by my side, protecting, caring and nurturing me as only a mother can. She slept by my side to give me comfort through my grief, and took her grandchildren under her wings as best she could. As my youngest son Joshua was only 3 at the time of his father's death, she felt even a stronger desire to make sure he was going to be all right. Their bond grew stronger as time went by. My mum was like a second mum to Josh, and he knew just how to wrap her around his tiny finger. 7 months had gone by since Rob's death. Things seemed to be going back to normal. One day, as Mum was dressing, she discovered what felt like a lump around her underwire bra. She took herself off to the doctors to be examined, and after a series of tests, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. What a shock to the system. I remember being given the news over the phone as my sister was with her and my dad was with me. I felt numb and thought there was no way I could go through this again, nor fathom what my mum must have been feeling, especially after watching her son-in-law die. Within a couple of days of the news, we had a family gathering. We cried and discussed our mother's future and diagnosis. It seemed quite positive, as the lump that had been found was in fact found only because Mum's bra had rubbed against the lump. The cancer was an aggressive type, but as it was found so small, her prognosis was looking extremely optimistic. Mum declared there and then that if she survives and gets all clear, she would take the whole family on a holiday to celebrate. First, though, she was going to need to have a lumpectomy. 6 rounds of chemotherapy and 6 weeks of radiation. 6 months came and went, reliving my husband's illness and then dealing with it on another level, that of my mum. What a brave woman she was. Mum was given a clean bill of health and was later told she would have less than a 10% chance of it ever recurring over the next 20 years. In November 2006, the cancer came back with a vengeance. Mum had not been feeling well since about April of that year. Constantly coughing and feeling achy all over. Countless visits to the doctors and still no real answers. It wasn't until she was ordered a CAT scan that the ugliness of the whole situation came to a morbid realization. I went with my parents to see the oncologist to understand the full picture. I listened with much anger and dismay at what the doctor was saying. I listened to anger, hurt and tears my mum conveyed. I wrote notes and all I could think about was that my mother was going to die and it was only a matter of time. It's funny really, but from the time my mum was told of her metastases, it was as if she had given up the fight. It didn't matter that she was to restart chemotherapy or to be put on conventional medication to help drag out the inevitable. She had given up on life. It was as if she reverted back to a childlike behaviour. No amount of treatment would help. It actually made things worse. It interacted with her in a way that caused terrible psychological disturbances. It was not only heartbreaking, but tragic. I, like the rest of my family, felt helpless. Many a times in the 6 months leading up to her death, she asked me if she was going to die. I would always answer, I don't know. But in my heart, whether it was nursing experience, my personal experience with my husband, or my intuition, I knew the answer to her question was yes. I could not tell her. It wasn't until 2 or 3 days before she died that when she asked me again, I said yes. At this point in time, I know she knew the answer. She needed to hear it from me. She was weak and totally dependent at this point. I had helped her to the toilet at this time of her question. What is the point of my writing this story? Firstly, I needed to do this as part of my healing. To put in words what you need to express is powerful. It helps you to express your thoughts, emotions, fears, and ultimately grief. I also believe I understand why my mum had to die and what she needed to experience on an emotional and nurturing level. Something she did not experience in childhood and then gave up on as an adult to be able to please those she loved. She was a true humanitarian, always giving and supporting those in need, whether it was family or her friends. As a child, she was a victim of abuse and that she never freed herself from, as if it was never dealt with properly. As a family, we each were able to give her the emotional support, unconditional love, and nurturing that her soul truly desired. Apart from the healing and crystal work I did with Mum, the biggest accomplishment I feel was teaching her the importance of dealing with past issues, writing about them and creating forgiveness without having to forget. One afternoon, whilst lying in her hospital bed, Mum and her beautiful sister started writing and talking and placing all notes they had written within a box that was supplied for this exercise. They sat together, laughing, crying, and contemplating. This exercise is simple yet extremely powerful, as it helps to create the shifts we need to bring about the healing process, bringing the emotion, feeling, hurt to the surface to then make it easier to clear. The night she died was a full moon, and with the greatest honour I did a little ritual and burnt what they wrote to release the past hurts and anguish. One of my biggest lessons learned throughout my introduction to the spiritual realm is that for every crisis there is a gift, an opportunity to be able to take the situation at hand, no matter how big or small, and see the good within. What has it taught you? How does it make you feel? What do you need to change? For me, my mother's illness has shown me how mental and emotional issues can truly create dis-ease within the body. It has shown me the different ways in which people deal with illness and how a strong, or in Mum's case, a not so strong mindset can dictate the path an illness takes. I also took from my mum tremendous strength, courage and wisdom. Her insight was far beyond her own her own realizations, not relationships. And for this, I have nicknamed her my owl. She is my wise owl. To verify my words, a few weeks after she died, I was standing at the front of my house and to my amazement, there was a tawny owl sitting on the wire. The grief I have for my mum is far from over, but I take the gift she gave me to carry on and pursue what I want most from this lifetime. And it is absolutely still so true today, 13 years down the track from writing about my experience that I had. Yes, the grief has got a lot easier to deal with. Yes, there are still times where I'm dealing with grief. It does resurface, and it's an acknowledgement, when it does resurface, but it's how we then choose to deal with it. There is something I didn't write about in this, and I'd really like to share it just before I finish this video. When my mum was passing over, actually the night before, we had a meeting at the hospital, and it was my family and my auntie. And a couple of days before that meeting, I had actually told my family about a recurring dream that I kept having, which actually ended up prophetic. And I kept dreaming of 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And I couldn't understand what was 4 o'clock. And I don't know why, but I felt the need to share it with my family, which I did. I think probably at that point I really knew that, it was to do around Mum's death. The night before we had the meeting at the hospital before she died, and my sister had decided that she was going to spend the night there at the hospital in case she passed over during the night. And I just kept saying, she's not going to pass. She's not going to pass. I don't believe she's going to pass overnight, because all I could hear in my head was, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And it just didn't feel right. It was going to be in the AM. So the next morning we all went into the hospital. We sat with Mum, and as the day progressed, Mum slowly went further and further into, losing consciousness, and very peacefully. But what we did keep asking her is, could she see Rob, my husband? And she just kept going like this, no. So she was coherent, like she understood what I was saying, even though she was starting to slowly slip away. And in the afternoon, I asked her again. It was not for long before she passed, but I said, can you see Rob? And she went like this. And that was quite an emotional moment, but it was just so peaceful. And we were watching the clock, and she was slowly going. The time of death was 4:01 in the afternoon. She died so peacefully, and being born into a Jewish family, the Chevra Kadisha is called. So I stayed in the room when everyone had gone out, and all I could hear, it was like she was sitting next to me, was thank you. And it was just such a beautiful experience to have had and to know. I think one of the other biggest things between the deaths that I have had so close to me, between my husband, my mum, my brother-in-law, is that I no longer fear death, because I know, having done so much work on myself and really getting involved in looking more into the esoteric, we don't ever die. Our body's an avatar. Our soul lives on forever. We come here from different star systems. This is not necessarily our first lifetime. And for many, we have been here a number of times. So I know that at the end of the day, and I understand so much, with what my husband said, that he didn't fear death. He just didn't want to leave his family. And I think that would probably ring true for a lot of people who don't fear death. that it is about being able, not wanting to leave their family, not in the physical sense though, not in the spiritual, because they're always around you. Thank you again for listening to my story. I hope it makes more sense to why it's so important for me to create these transformational journeys, and in particular to Egypt. I'm very aligned to Egypt for a number of reasons there. But if you would like to know more, please go to www.seedofthesoul.com and you will find my tour there. Even www.phoenixgateway.com.au, you will find the tool there and it will lead you to Seed of the Soul. Okay? The seed of the soul is the seed of our eternal existence. Big love to you all and speak soon.